Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and we're going to jump right into part number 5 of the Too Many Bones Undertow playthrough. The very first thing I want to talk about, guys, is a couple corrections that I have, one of which being one of the biggest corrections I want to make. And I want to explain to you guys something that I did incorrectly during the last battle in terms of Gasket's hydro valve die. So this is a close-up of Gasket's hydro die, which is rolled whenever dice are rolled for Gasket. And when I rolled this green bone twice in the last battle, there should have been a point which I took this bone, placed it in my backup plan, and then immediately triggered the backup plan at that point. That's what this green bone represents, and it's also re-emphasized on Gasket's reference card. I did miss this during the playthrough. However, there is one way to kind of balance this out for fairness purposes, because of course Gasket was able to reach to the end of his backup plan at 6 bones and gain an 8+1. And in order to kind of continue on and balance things out, one of the things that Gasket can do in these situations where, let's say hypothetically, he has rolled this bone here, which happened twice in the last video, instead of taking it at its face value that you're seeing here, whether it's before or after the hydro valve die is rolled, Gasket is allowed to discard one of his loot cards in order to actually set that die to whichever side he'd like. Now, in the last battle, we had tons of hydro to spend, so I could have easily flipped this over and set it to hydro, which is what I would have and should have done. At that particular point, I would have had to lose something like the malfunctioning mech arm and get rid of that, which I will be doing here and now. So in order to balance things out and keep my 8+1, I will be losing malfunctioning mech arm from Gasket. Now, there's a ripple effect here because I traded what's called the kelp card, another loot card that is now technically in Duster's possession, because at the end of the last video we traded it to Duster. But now what I'm doing is I'm going to be taking that card away from Duster because it technically was in Gasket's possession during the battle last video. And by removing both of these loot cards, I'd be able to set this die when I rolled the green bone both times to the side that I choose instead. And so that will balance things out. Now, again, it does not resolve the fact that I didn't get the bones needed to get all the way up to an 8+1. But based on the fact that Gasket rolls about 4 dice every single time it rolls dice in general, the odds were pretty high we would get the 2 bones we needed before the end. So in order to kind of balance out that mistake, that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to lose some loot here, and that is within the gameplay mechanics, because that's what you do in the moment in order to stop your actual backup plan for Gasket from triggering. So that is the major correction that I want to make from the last video, and there was a couple other small minor things that I mentioned in the pinned comment in the prior video that you can go and review on your own. However, I would like to get everyone up to speed on what loot is now sitting on both of our characters, since we had to discard some in order to balance things out. So first off, Duster still has both trove loot that she originally had, so the water mask as well as the gadget armor, 2 really useful trove loot cards, and the descaler. So those 3. So now I have an available slot basically for some loot at some point in time for Duster. Now coming over here to Gasket, Gasket now only has a single card because I was able to obtain a loot in the end of the last encounter, and this one was not in play during the battle at all. I didn't actually have this one on Gasket, but Gasket still has 1 left. Again, Gasket uses loot very differently than everybody else. We already know this, and this one is the Spider Silk Slav, if I'm saying that correctly. And we'll go ahead and now put those beside our characters. We're going to continue on with the encounter choice based on your feedback. Now is the time to figure out what you guys voted as the most popular encounter choice to go with going into what is going to be a battle for sure. As you can see the icons here, neither of these are passive. We are going to have to do, or peaceful, we're going to have to do a battle here. One has an optional ability here if we choose a second one to get an extra progress point. We have the very first option, which is shut off that siren, and the second option is to ignore the siren. And overwhelmingly from across the video voting as well as the comments voting as well as social media, shut off that siren was the top choice. There was a few people, quite a few people actually, that wanted to ignore the siren as well, but my guess is that the community saw the value in just going after the top one as the easier of the two, because when you include mechs in, like this top choice here says include and then shows 2 mech chips, you're basically including 2 of those darker chips into the pile. They will come in at the very bottom, whereas Whereas if we had chose the second option, it says add a number of mechs in. So essentially it's separate from the baddie points. That's the really big difference between include and add. Include will actually take away from the total baddie points. So in other words, we're on day 6. We have 2 Gearlocs, so we have 12 baddie points to fill up. By choosing encounter 1, as you guys did, we're going to go ahead and know that we have 12 baddie points. But first we have to include 2 of those mechs, and they are 3-point values each. So if we go ahead and grab 2 of them, we're going to have 6 baddie points already consumed by the mechs already. And then the other 6 are going to come from regular baddies, so a 5 and a 1, because we cannot pull 20 with a 6 remaining. So those will be sitting on top. Now the biggest thing to remember here, guys, is when the mechs are coming in, they're coming in at the very bottom of the stack. So technically, if this was the first one, then the second one that comes into play would be underneath of it, and then everything else here we're building up for the baddie queue sits on top of it. So 5 will be first and 1 will be second. So we'll bring these to the battle mat so you can actually see 5 and 1. And we'll be revealing these as we go because none of them have been scouted, so we actually have no heads-up knowledge as to what these are. Now, at the very bottom here of this choice number 1, it also says Gearlocs have dex stat reduced by 1 for round number 1. So we're going to have to remember that we have 1 less dex, but just for that 1 round. So this is definitely the safer choice, and I think the community chose this mainly because of the fact that we only need 1 more progress in order to go after Nobulous, because we have 6 currently. Getting this 1 success on this one here will gain us 1 progress point, which is all we need to be able to take on Nobulous. The optional one here is not as much value because the last encounter we got 2 progress and we're able to basically gain a day almost, essentially, by gaining that extra progress point. So this would have been a lot more useful to go after earlier in our campaign if we had to hit it, but we didn't. And we also have a really cool effect down here at the very bottom. It says either way, whichever choice you go with, if it's successful, the party may find a special encounter council labs, research and development, and place it on top of the encounter deck. So if we decided we wanted to spend some extra time going through encounters instead of going after Nobulous, even though we'll have the full amount of progress points if we're successful in this encounter, we could do that. So that'll be a choice maybe that I'll throw back to you guys. We'll see how that pans out. So let's head to the battle mat here, build our queue of 4 baddies, and we'll total up to 12 points, and then we'll start revealing and filling them into the lanes. Now, I've gone ahead here and placed the 2 mech baddies right out in the open because I really wanted to explain first off how the include works, or that keyword, during the setup for mechs to be involved in your battle queue. But technically, to start things off, you would go ahead and just be sure of how many actual points you have based on how many are being included. So in my case, 2 were included for the encounter, which I know is 6 total points. So I know that 6 total points can fit into the 12 baddie points that I have. So I have no worries there. But if you ever don't have enough baddie points for the amount of mechs being included, then you just don't include them. So they don't get to be put in anyway if you don't have the baddie points to actually handle the point values on these. So in this case, I do, because I have 12 baddie points. So I know 6 will be sucked up by these 2. So I can go over to the 1, 5s, and 20s and figure out what 6 can go into. And as we spoke about earlier, we know a 5 can go into it, and we have not scouted this 5. And we know a 1 can go into it. And as always, the highest one goes on top. And the difference here in terms of the mechs is that the mechs, being as special as they are here in Undertow, are actually going to be slotted at the very bottom position of the stack always, unless otherwise stated. So there you go. We've got ourselves our battle queue all sorted out, and now we can start putting these things into their corresponding lanes. So as you can see here, we flipped the battle mat over because we know we're doing a land battle. We got the round 1 die set to round 1. We can see here we have lane 1 and 2 already filled in. I did this in advance to speed up on the time side of things. These are the regular baddies that are already entered into lane 1 first and then 2. So that's a 5-point baddie in lane 1 and a 1-point baddie in lane 2. You can see we've got one that's 7 health. We're going to go ahead and zoom in on these so you can actually see a little bit more about their abilities and just the look of these particular baddies. So here are the baddies up close and personal. We have in lane number 1 on the left-hand side, the 5-point baddie. This one's called a Dragon Grounder. It has 7 health, initiative of 5, so I'll be going very early in the turn order. And I don't know if my Gearlocs will be able to best that, but we'll see with some when we actually roll for those initiatives. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Chimp Halfwit. And even though it says Halfwit, this thing can do some pain for being a 1-point baddie. It does have that Blind Strike ability again for 1. 1, and it has 1 mind, which is a brand new ability we haven't seen just yet. So first off, weaken on the left-hand side for the 5-point baddie is the one where we place a weakened die on the target, and the unit must reduce its dex by that number next turn. So good news there is that it will not be stacking with the encounter effect that says Gearlocs have the dex stat reduced by 1 for the first round. It would take effect by the second round if anyone gets hit by it. So that's good news. That's like the only good news there. On the other baddie on the right-hand side, as I mentioned, Blind Strike, we are familiar with this one. Before moving this unit, it deals a number of damage to the strongest adjacent unit. Now here's what's really interesting about this, and this came up in the last video. Blind Strike says the strongest adjacent unit. So when it says unit, it literally means anybody. It could blind strike anybody. So thematically and in terms of the actual, even the terms used in that ability, it's a blind strike. It will hit Gearlocs if they're the strongest, but will also hit baddies. So in this particular case, having this half-wit sitting right next to this dragon grounder, this could actually really work out for us because it'll just start blindly smacking away at the other one, which is pretty good. So again, this one will only be rolling 1 defensive die. It doesn't attack us, but does have the ability called 1 mind, which we have not seen before. And this one says on this unit's turn, all other beast type baddies, so if they have the paw print, which is the purple paw print you can see actually down at the bottom of this particular chip, they get to roll 1 attack die against their targets. So it's just kind of like a 1 mind mentality of kind of, a dog pile mentality where if one of them does it, the rest of them are going to follow. Monkey see, monkey do. Best way to say it. So those are the 2 essential regular baddies all covered up, and now we're going to go into how we bring mechs into the game, because we know the next 2 baddies to come out in lane 3 and 4 are going to be for mechs, but these ones come into the battle mat differently, just like the Krellin did. Alright, time to reveal our mechs and get these things placed on the battle mat. So the very first mech coming into play is going to be the Mech Hound. This one is a health of 3, initiative 3, attacks with 2 dice and rolls 2 defensive dice, has a bone ability that triggers for disruption, and also has the ability called swap. So we're going to have to talk about those and what that means. But first, let's go ahead and place this baddie on the mat. The first thing you do with a mech when it enters in is, even though I mentioned earlier it comes in lane 3 or lane 4, it essentially just assumes one of the lane chips, but doesn't actually come into the 3rd or 4th lane. The die is rolled similar to the Krellin spawning, and these mechs will spawn in one of these outside starting spaces for Undertow. So one of the 6 positions to the left or right of this battle mat. So we're going to go ahead here, we're going to roll this die to figure out what position that is. We got ourselves a 6, so we'll be stopping right here. So we're going to go ahead, grab the chips, put it in place, and we'll move to the next mech. The last mech that we have coming into the battle mat is going to be a Mech Darter. And for this particular one, it'll have 2 health, 4 on the initiative track, 3 defense dice when it rolls. That's pretty powerful. It also has 1 attack die. It has self-repair of 1, another ability we need to look into, and swap. So similar to the other mech, same ability across the board there. We'll talk about those abilities because these are likely to be some new ones for individuals who haven't played Undertow before. But first, let's get the health underneath the chip and then get this particular baddie in its correct space by rolling a d6 to determine where that will be. So we've got ourselves a 3. So this one will be positioning itself right here to begin the battle. Alright, so we got all the baddies set up in their correct spaces. We have mechs on the far sides of this battle mat, and then we got conventional baddies in the middle. The big thing to remember, guys, with mechs in battle is that mechs behave differently than conventional baddies. And conventional baddies are these 2 in the center, the regular 25s and 1-point baddies. These mech baddies here, however, move a little differently. So they are allowed to move out of and back into starting positions that they may come into. So I can move this, or this particular mech could potentially move here and end up moving back out to this area. So basically it has access to move between the 4x4 grid plus these starting positions on the sides, whereas conventional baddies like these guys cannot go into these starting positions. Now if they're in some weird way displaced and moved into those areas, which can happen through game effects, then basically the first thing they do is try to move out of that mech starting positions, and then it also, though, in certain situations where they might be displaced into these areas and they're adjacent to something they can attack, they will not move in those cases and they are able to go ahead and attack. But when they're able to get out of them, they will try to. So again, at the end of the day, these cannot be intentionally moved into starting positions, but could unintentionally be moved based on game effects, whereas these mechs can bounce around between them without any worry. And finally here, let's talk about Gearlocs and how they work in terms of these starting positions when they're having a land battle. So something just like this. Gearlocs may not intentionally move into a mech starting position. Should a Gearloc find itself in one, whether an encounter forces it or a baddie skill does, its first move position cannot be a mech starting position. So essentially you are basically getting out of that position, and you're not able to keep utilizing the fact you've been pushed into one. So basically at the end of the day, whether it's a conventional baddie being pushed into the mech starting position or a Gearloc, they are attempting to try to get out of those positions. So now it's time to roll our Gearlocs dice and find out what the initiatives will be for Duster and Gasket. We got ourselves a 3 and a 4. And there we go, we got ourselves our Gearlocs slotted into the initiative meter. Now we need to decide where Duster and Gasket will begin on the battle mat. Now we're going to take a close look at these two mechs on either side of the battle mat. I want to show you the abilities as well as a couple icons that are different and the setup for these particular baddies when they enter the battle mat. So first off, you might notice just underneath that attack die of 1 that this particular mech darter has, there's a similar icon that looks like a yellow shield that has a 3 underneath of it. And this is very different than the defense icon that shows like this with a black shield and a yellow background. That one means that you're actually rolling defense for that particular baddie when it does its attack and defense roll. But in this particular case with this baddie, it's a little different. This yellow defensive icon basically says when this unit enters the battle mat, place defensive dice totaling the number of defense on this unit. Use the fewest amount of defense dice possible. So in this case, in order to get to a 3, we would have to use 2 dice because one represents a 2 and one represents a 1. That would be the smallest amount of dice in terms of total that we could put on this baddie. We wouldn't go ahead and put 3 1s on it, for instance. So we basically go like this. So right out of the gates, this thing has a whole bunch of defense we got to bust through. Now on top of this, it's got abilities here called Self-Repair 1 and Swap. Now Self-Repair says at the start of this unit's turn, place defensive dice totaling the number on it up to its yellow shielded stat. So in other words, every single time this thing activates, it's going to get back its defense without having to make any defensive rolls ever. It's just going to constantly be in a state of self-repair and defending itself, and it's just going to be a hardened shell. So it's going to be very tough to get through this thing. We're going to have to get some serious hits in order to get past that 3 defense because it will just always have it, unless of course we chip our way through it. Now Swap, on the other hand, is a different ability, and Swap says at the end of the unit's turn, it will switch positions with the closest, strongest opposing unit. So that one's really, really interesting because it'll do a little bit of a swap of positions with a Gearloc, for instance. Now again, it does say unit, but it does mention opposing. So technically, baddies are out of the question in that situation because they're not considered an opposing unit. They're not something that this particular mech would be going after, but a Gearloc is. So there would be a positional switch there in that case, and that actually leads us into the other mech on the other side of the board, which also has Swap as an ability, but we now know what that means, and we'll talk quickly about that other mech right now. And wouldn't you know it, this actual mech has the exact same situation going on with it, with a yellow shield, meaning at the start of or when it enters the battle mat, it's going to gain 2 defense immediately, and it has to be on the least amount of dice possible, so we know we can make a 2 defense out of 1 die, so it won't be 2 1s, it will be 1 2, and it gets that right from the get-go. And then underneath it, it has Swap. We already talked about what that means, so we're familiar with that. It's going to do some changing of positions at the very end of its turn, and Disruption, however, is going to trigger when it rolls bones. And of course, the only time it can potentially roll bones is if it's rolling attack dice, and a Disruption is actually advancing the round counter die to the fatigue round at the end of the round. So that's crazy. If this thing rolls a bone, it literally forces the battle to just speed up essentially, or basically we get to a point where every single round going after that is going to result in everyone losing a health, and it becomes just a battle of survival, basically trying to not only knock these baddies out but not lose all of our health. So that's actually something we really don't want to see on the dice early on for this particular baddie's rules. It rolls 2 attack dice, so it does have basically like a 2 in 12 chance of potentially landing that on any given roll that it does for attack. So that's a little dangerous, but now you at least understand how these mechs are set up from the get-go. It is a little bit different, especially with those defensive dies on top. All right, now here we go. We've got ourselves both Gearlocs placed on the battle mat where I think they make the most sense out of the gates, and I'll talk you guys through why I put them where I put them. First off, Gasket has the lowest amount of health, and I wanted to place Gasket right up against this particular mech hound. I also want to keep Duster within fighting distance of this thing, because if we can take this thing down, this disruption will not happen. You can see that based on my health, having this thing hit a bone at any point in time is going to be very, very detrimental to us, because those chips come straight from our Gearloc's health. And I can tell you, even with a 7-point baddie in play, it'll be very difficult to keep us from dying if that triggers really early. So we really need to take this one down as a priority. It has basically 5 health, because we gotta get through 2 defense and 3 of its health to take it down. I put a Gasket right beside it, because what I could hopefully try and pull off is the ability for Gasket to actually beef himself up with some shields, although he will not need as much in that first roll, because he has an 8+1, which allows me to start the battle with the same amount of defense that I actually have defense value for. So in my stat area there, my defense is 4, so I actually get to start in my active area with 4 defense, meaning I don't really have to worry about rolling dice off the top for defense right away. So I'm going to place these 2 in the active area for Gasket, which is great, and I get to do that kind of at the start of this battle. So that's another reason why I want Gasket to be the character that potentially attacks this thing. We also have a lot of cool new abilities with Gasket, like Blitz, Blast, and Cut, that we can try to really hammer this thing and get rid of it quick if we really think that that's the best choice. Now, far over here on the other side of the map, we have another mech that I'm not as worried about. It'll take some time for this thing to get over to us, and likely will be the most annoying with its constant regeneration of defense. It will eventually come over to us and attack the weakest, so it will head to Gasket. That's okay, because Gasket will hopefully have time to shield up for whatever attacks come his way. Now, these 2 right here are interesting, because both of these guys go for different things. First off, this guy, the Chimp Halfwit, is going to use its Blind Strike 1, and the great news with this is it will not hit Duster, who's going to start over here. And you might also be wondering, how is Duster starting in a green area, because the Gearlocs are supposed to come in on these gray areas here on land, but Duster has the ability called Shadow Dweller. And that Shadow Dweller ability says Duster may start on any position on the battle mat. She also starts with Nightshade's initiative die and chip, which we already have all figured out, but of course I can't bring Nightshade in until Duster's been hit. So I think her being right there is perfect for a number of reasons. One, she's there. We know Blue will activate first. Blue will go, but literally won't be able to get to anybody this turn. So that's why I positioned them the way I did, because it gives us 1 turn of not this massive baddie coming out and smashing us right out of the gates. And it gives me a turn to be here in order to hit this thing and hopefully do some damage. And maybe this thing can actually do some silly blind strikes, because it's half-wit to its own baddie, essentially, or its own friend, because this Blind Strike 1 will only attack whichever unit has the highest amount of health. In this case, that is going to be that Dragon Grounder. So if I can keep those guys close together, and they're above, and the Grounder is above my HP, I can abuse that a little bit, kind of play a little bit of chicken with it. So this should be interesting. I might have found a way to kind of defeat this one out of the gates. We'll see how it pans out. Last time I thought I had it, and it went right down to the wire. So we've got the setup done and complete. So with Gasket, we definitely don't want to forget about the canisters. We want to make sure we put all of those at 5 and put them up into the locked areas. The Hydro Valve die can come out, because we need to roll this all the time. The rest of these dice are going to be used as we see fit. Again, if we really need health, we do have 1 loot card we can discard in order to get our power converter up, and that will give us some healing. We may need it, we may not. We'll see how we go. This Spider Silk particular item is actually not too useful for us right now, because you basically place health chips on it during the recovery phase, so this is not going to really do anything for us right now. So it is one that I am kind of willing to discard if we get into a situation where we need it. And as you can see here, we've got the 4 total defense to start with Gasket, because of the Steambot Pro innate ability he has, which allows him to have the full 4 defense from the get-go. With all that being said, we are now set up between Duster and Gasket, and the battle mat is also set up, so we can begin with the initiative meter. All right, so we're going to start off here with the Dragon Grounder, who is going to activate and head towards this position here. So it's going to move 2 spaces on its way. Now it cannot make it to my Gearlocs. And again, at the end of the day, when it's equal distance, it's going to go after the weakest. So in the end, it will go after Gasket. This particular individual cannot roll attack dice right now because it's not orthogonally adjacent to anybody to attack, but it can roll the inactive or unused defense dice that it currently has for it. So we're going to go to the dice tray here, roll the 2 defense, and see what happens. And now we're going to roll it off here to find out what defense this baddie will get. 2 1s. So just like this, we got 2 1s placed on top of it, and that is going to resolve the end of that baddie's activation. And we're going to now move to the next one in the initiative meter, which is Gasket. Gasket is going to be going ahead here. Now we have to remember the very first round of this particular battle, the encounter card stated that Gearlocs have a dex stat reduced by 1 for round number 1. So this is very, very important, and it's going to come into play when I try to take this thing down as fast as possible before its disruption kicks in and really pushes us into a fatigue round, which could happen with it rolling 2 dice. Bones are not that rare, so it's very possible that could happen. I really want to get this one off the mat. So let's go ahead with the Gasket and get the dice pool together. And also we got to grab that Hydro die if we plan on rolling dice. All right, so we're at the dice tray. Gasket's going to make his attack. We know we've got no movement happening for Gasket, so no dex spent there. We definitely have to roll the Hydro die. We're making an attack because we know our target is going to be the Mech Hound, and I'm spending a dex by rolling this die. We also lose a dex from the encounter for the first round, so we've spent 2, and then I'm going to spend 2 more dex to use these 2 dice in order to make an attack. So we're going to roll all these 3 together, hope for good numbers so that Duster can hopefully come in behind and finish it off. We'll see how this goes. That's actually not terrible. So we'll go ahead and we're going to resolve this and see what happens. Of course, remember now, the green bone here on this die has to be resolved immediately. The backup plan is resolved during the resolve your roll step. So we'll be resolving the hot fix for Gasket along with this damage going towards the baddie. So we're going to go ahead and slot in our die here, and we immediately have to go ahead and use the backup plan at this point, and it's for Hotfix. Hotfix says Gasket adds or increases a defense die by 1. So we're going to be going ahead here and adding a defense die into his active pool, which is actually pretty good because we basically got like a free defense on him, so that worked out really well. And we didn't have to spend any Hydro, so that was pretty good. Now we'll go ahead and resolve the 2 attack dice that we landed on the enemy. So overall, a pretty successful roll here, a 2 and a 1 going up against the 2. So the 2 is obviously taken off. That'll resolve this die, and then 1 is going to get through. So we'll take 1 health off of this guy. So now we potentially have a chance during this round if Duster can get in there and take it out before it activates the yellow lane baddie. This one right here, Mech Hound, actually activates at the end of the initiative meter. So we have a chance to take it out before that bone happens to cause disruption, which would bring us into a fatigue round very, very early in the battle. So next up is going to be this green lane baddie, which happens to be this one way over here. So again, at the very, very beginning here, self-repair kicks in, but self-repair does nothing when the active dice are already on this thing equal to the number on the chip, which is 3. So we're good there. We have to determine our target here. So first off, we have 2 potential targets. Currently right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away, or 1, 2, 3, 4 away. So this is going to be the one that it heads towards. So we're going to be going ahead and moving this thing 2, so it will move from its starting position outside of the 4x4 grid into the grid as it makes its way over to Gasket. And it does have a swap ability, but it doesn't trigger because it didn't actually stop at the end of its turn next to any adjacent opposing unit that it can swap places with. So that's pretty much the end of that activation. Nice and easy. Now we're going to move over to Duster, who's hopefully going to go ahead and try to get down here to help out Gasket by taking down this Mech Hound. So just so everyone's aware, I've already moved Duster 1 space south in order to be adjacent to the mech that she is going to be attacking, which is that Mech Hound. So she has already spent 1 dex there, and we know that we've lost a dex for being in round 1. So currently she only has 2 dex left. And in this particular case, I'm going to risk it here, and I'm going to be rolling 2 attack dice in order to try to take this thing down before it does any damage. The downside to this, or maybe the upside, I'm not 100% sure yet, but I'm hoping that overall I'm going to be able to potentially avoid Duster taking too much damage with no defense dice on her just yet. We'll see how this goes. Here is the 2 attack dice coming at lane marker number 4, or my apologies, number 3, hoping to get at least 2 hits. And we got it. We got 3 hits. So that baddie is going to be gone, and we've now hopefully can calm down a little bit in terms of worrying about the fatigue round coming in a little early. So that mech hound is long gone, blown right off the map. We've taken it down, so that's awesome. One less individual to deal with. So that has been completely removed, and in terms of Duster's turn, she is done. So with that baddie now removed, we'll go ahead and take that initiative die out, so it won't be activating. And this one right here, the last baddie, will go ahead and activate, which is the purple one hiding in behind the blue lane marker. So we're now activating the Chimp Halfwit, who is not the greatest help for the baddies, but basically it's going to do a blind strike now, and because the adjacent unit is this large stacked 7 health dragon grounder, it will be taking the brunt of that blind strike as it's adjacent and will be blocking one of it. So it's they're hurting each other a little bit, which is great, and I was hoping for that based on how I placed my Gearlocs originally. So there's that hit, and that happens before movement happens. Now the other thing I want to make mention of is this one mind ability we talked about earlier. If there was any more of the purple icon here in terms of baddies in play, then they would all work together essentially to activate an additional hit and things like that, but there's no other baddies like that in the battle, so that ability is basically dead. It doesn't really have any benefit. It says for the one mind ability, it says on this unit's turn, all other beast type baddies roll 1 attack die against their target. So all other, not the one that's actually got the ability. So there is none. So that's nice and easy. So first off, it's going to move, and it needs to determine its movement. And of course, the closest Gearloc right now is going to be Duster. So it's going to shift its position over like this. It's determined its target. It's now moved. And of course, it doesn't actually attack. It just rolls 1 defensive die. So we're going to go ahead and we'll roll 1 defensive die for it to see if it actually defends itself a little bit. And it does. So it's going to gain 1 defense just like that. So I really think we can consider that first round a huge success because we did exactly what we set out to do, plus we didn't take any damage. We also were able to handle that 1 round of having 1 dex less. But now we're moving into round number 2, so thankfully we will get that dex back and we're back to full dex essentially. We can roll more dice. We have 3 more baddies to take down, guys, and we can complete this battle and move on to more exciting things. This is really cool, so hopefully things go our way as we continue on. So first off, we'll be activating the blue baddie, who you can see is definitely going to be within range of doing some damage. Alright, so this is the only downside to my plan, and that's the fact that Duster's going to be taking a little bit of a beating here, which could be kind of dangerous. So we really have to hope that the dice are in our favor here, because it could result in a pretty tragic ending. So first off, we're going to go ahead and determine our target. We know that the blue baddie here is definitely going to target the adjacent Duster. It's, again, all these individuals on the battle mat were melee, so it is happy where it currently is, doesn't need to go after anybody else. So target's been determined. In terms of an effect, its ability is weakened 2, so it will place a weaken 2 on Duster, which is going to reduce the amount of dex Duster can have on its next turn, which is too bad. So that's going to reduce it down even further than it was the first round, which is not the greatest. And now it's going to go ahead and it's going to make some nasty attack. Now you'll see here it does roll 3 attack dice and 2 defense. 1 defense is already on it, so it won't roll one of those 2. So it'll only roll 1 defense die, and then it's going to roll 3 attack dice against Duster. So we're going to head to the dice tray and we're going to see what kind of pain is coming Duster's way. All right, here we go into probably the most nerve-wracking roll ever. We're rolling 3 attack dice against 4 health. This is not good odds. Now, guys, first off, I really wanted to go for getting that baddie out of there. That could have had a skill that would have pushed us to the fatigue round really early, and I really think we wouldn't have survived that well. So I'm really, really hoping that this roll doesn't come back to haunt me, but it's 3 attack dice and 1 defense. Here we go. Cross your fingers. I'm going to need all the luck I can get that we get a couple bones here to save myself. Here we go. Okay, that worked out. I mean, I don't like the defense on there, but having only 2 hits is good. Duster has 4 health, and we do have some loot and the ability to heal Duster through Trove Loot, so we might be able to sustain this hit, so that's not bad. Let's go ahead and resolve these dice. Whew. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and resolve the 2 hits against Duster, so we're going to knock 2 HP off. Of course, the weaken still stays, sadly. And just like that, she's a little bit lower down to the ground now, not doing so well for the health side of things. And then the extra defensive die is going to be gained back on top of this, so it totally full up at 2 rolled and 2 active on this particular baddie, so no more defensive dice to roll in the future until those ones are used. And the weaken is still there, and we are now done. The bone that it rolled during the attack did nothing. There's no advantage for that for the baddie, so activation is complete. And now we're going to move to Gasket, who's going to activate next. So here we go. we're going to start off with gasket. We're going to start with some movement here. So for the Gearloc, we're going to move. I don't want to use any loot on gasket just yet. And again, loot is very differently used for gasket. So, but even in terms of just using it for the power converter, I'm going to wait. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use a movement here to move from here. So that's 1 dex. Again, remember guys, we're in second round, so we have 4 decks now, all 4 to use on gasket. I'm now going to assign a target. My target is going to be the Dragon Grounder. However, when I'm choosing my target, I know that I have to pick my pool of dice. So of course I have to roll my Hydro die if I want to roll other things. I really want to use this attack here, which I think is going to help Duster. I'm going to try to use this blast die that I had from before to try to hit this chimp halfwit up here, because it's going to smack Duster for 1 damage based on its blind strike next time it activates, and I'd like to see if I can potentially get rid of it before that happens, or at least help Duster get rid of it before that happens, and it activates at the very end of the round, right? So we can try to clear that out. The cool thing is that the way blast works for gasket is, if you guys aren't familiar with this, essentially it deals a number of damage to a non-adjacent unit, and when you get that particular roll, you must use the results. You have to use it. So it's really cool because it allows me to do something from distance and blasting somebody. So my target though still is going to be the Dragon Grounder, because I am going to be rolling 1 attack die. The cool thing with gasket, or rather the tough thing with gasket in terms of managing hydro, is that I do have 10 hydro still currently, but with that I also have these little drops of hydro that are spent when I'm actually rolling these dice. So right now up in the top left hand or right hand corner, you'll see a little drop there for this die. This means if I choose to actually use that die once I roll it for its result, I have to pay 1 hydro to use that. Now if I had another die here, like say I decided to put cut in here as well when I rolled the 3 that I have remaining after removing 1, then I'd have 2 dice here with a hydro on it, and I'd actually have to spend 2 hydro for the second die that uses hydro, and so on and so forth. So really, once you start going ahead and just putting lots of skill dice in 1 turn, it kind of caps you on how powerful you can be, because you're burning a ridiculous amount of hydro if you jam them all into 1 roll. So this would literally cost me, if I landed all these dice, it'd be 1 hydro plus this one here would be an actual skill die. So this would cost me 1, this would cost me 2, this would cost me 3. So you're talking 6 hydro across all of those dice. That would literally deplete half of my stuff and really put me in a bad situation of running out. So again, I don't want to use all those this round, but I thought I'd mention that because I haven't gotten to a point of using that many yet, but it's good information to know. So we're going to go back to our original plan here of this. Let's go to the dice tray, roll it, and see if we can help out Duster. We'll take an attack here with the 1 white die, and that's our target, and we're hoping the blast can hit this one in the back. All right, wish me luck here. We're hoping for good hits here. High values. Nice, that was perfect. Okay, so we actually got a decent hit here. Oh, and we're gonna have to go ahead and actually use, oh, that'll actually work out pretty good. So let's go ahead and resolve these dice. I like this. So first off, coming over here to gasket side of things, we do have the bone, which we are going to resolve putting into a hotfix and going ahead and using the hotfix. We might as well resolve it now anyway. It says basically gasket adds or increases a defense die by 1. So the great thing is it goes in and literally gets used right away. I'll just go back in the prep area, but I can literally tick this up to 2. So now I have 6 defense. I have literally as much defense as I can possibly have on gasket. That's great. This one right here was the best roll I could have gotten on this die, so it worked perfectly. Remember guys, gasket does not exhaust skill dice. This is a huge thing with gasket. You never want to forget this, because most Gearlocs, every time you use a skill die, it's exhausted. It sits on the left hand side of this area here, but you don't with gasket. So this die is going to actually end up going back into his area to be used again later. The reason why it's okay to be reusing stuff is, as I mentioned earlier, the hydro cost. If you can't pay the hydro, you can't do it. So in this case, this hydro here cost me 1, so I do have to tick my canister down by 1 in order to do that blast. And we know the target of that blast is going to be that chimp halfwit. So it takes 2 damage. It has 1 active defense die on top of it, so we remove that, and it will take 1 health off of the total chip. So you guys can see here that it has 3. It will go down to 2 and then go back to the battle mat. So we've resolved that die as well. And lastly, our actual target of the attack was the Dragon Grounder, who has 2 active defensive dice on top of it. So one of them is removed in order to resolve this die. And just like that, we have resolved all the dice for gasket, and that turn is over. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off here with the green lane baddie. So we're going to activate that one, which is right here. And self-repair will not trigger because 3 is already the highest total this thing can have. And swap's not going to trigger until we move it. And so first, it happens at the end of the turn, by the way. So first, we're going to go ahead and move this thing into position to make an attack. And it can attack with 1 attack die. And its closest Gearloc to go after is Gasket. So it will be rolling 1 attack die, which I'll just roll onto the mat here so that we can see it. And then after we resolve this attack, we know that Gasket has an insane amount of defense, so we don't really have to worry about this attack too much. So 1 hit. So I will tick down one of my active dice in Gasket's area to a 1, and we've resolved that quite easily. Next up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a swap. So this is where basically we're going to have Gasket get thrown over here, and this one's going to sit over here. Now, this is interesting because it puts this particular mech on a side closer to Duster, which is not exactly the best. Now, again, this one will continue to go after Gasket so long as I leave Gasket right there. But if I even moved 1 space further away, then it would go after the weakest, which would be Duster. So I really want to keep Gasket right up against that mech until it's gone now. It's kind of locked me in, otherwise I'll have way too many enemies going after Duster, and that's going to resolve that enemy's turn, and we can move over to Duster to hopefully remove this baddie, I'm hoping, from the mat. So going into this turn, we're going to go ahead and remove this weaken 2 die, although this turn, currently we lose 2 decks. So that's something to be a note of, or make note of. We have 4 decks total. We removed 2 decks, so we only have 2 decks left to spend. So I'm really just going for a kill here. I really just want to remove this guy. That's going to be the goal. Now, what I'm really worried about is the fact that this monstrosity will go later on and will target me. And I'm really worried that Duster will not survive that attack very well, will likely be destroyed. So the question is, do I try to attack this thing and maybe use something like bottled smoke, which is one of my ability to become untargetable? That could help me in this particular case. It might be worthwhile, seeing as I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off, but I could get lucky with this bottled smoke and 1 attack die and roll a 2 if I get super lucky and be able to actually take it out plus go into hiding, which would be amazing. Don't know if that's going to happen, but we could try for that, and it's probably the safest thing to do. So let's go with that. Let's see how it works. We have multiple sides where that's going to be successful. I think 2 of them are bones, so we have a chance at failure there for becoming untargetable, but let's leave it in the dice hands and see how this pans out. All right, here we go. We're rolling our bottled smoke and the attack die. We know our target. We're not moving anywhere. We only have 2 decks to spend, so I'm using it right now. We know Nightshade's coming in here at the end of this round, so that's helpful. But if Duster doesn't survive very long, that's going to be kind of not so hot. So here's hoping we can go. Yes. Oh, we totally missed on even doing any damage, but we did get a bone. So let's go ahead and resolve putting that into backup plan, maybe seeing if it's something we can use, and then we're also going to become untargetable, which means Duster will survive. So we're going to slot that bone we just received into the backup plan. It says Pack Mentality, which says move Duster Nightshade to a position adjacent to the other. Duster may also switch targets now. So it's not something I really want to use yet because Nightshade's not even on the mat. So I'll just hold on to it. Again, this is not like the green bone that you can get from Gasket. You do not have to resolve your backup plan right now. So I'll definitely hold it for now. And then in terms of the smoke, we definitely have to exhaust that die. We don't get it back. So this will sit on the left-hand side of the mat. It's gone, but it does allow me to put an untargetable die like this on top of Duster, meaning that Duster cannot be targeted for attacks. So that's fantastic. All right, and certainly last but not least is this little guy up here who was able to hide. Now, the blind strike right now states before moving, this unit deals damage to the strongest adjacent unit, but you cannot hit Duster because Duster is untargetable right now. Now, the question becomes a little bit of wording there. So, untargetable says place the untargetable effect die on this unit until the start of this unit's next turn. It cannot be targeted by opposing units. So, the blind strike says before moving this unit, it deals damage to the strongest adjacent unit. So that's a real tough one because I could see an argument there where someone says blind strike still happens regardless of me being untargetable because it's technically not me being targeted by an attack, and usually when a baddie targets, it chooses a target and then rolls attack dice against me. So I don't know which way to go on that one because I'm not 100% certain. I might have to double check that. And yes, indeed, even though I'm untargetable, and I thought that was a brilliant plan, I just confirmed seconds after doing this that yes, in fact, the blind strike one still gets through because, as I mentioned, it's not considered a targeted attack. It's just an attack. It's literally a blind attack, and it's like stabbing into a pile of trees, basically. Still hits me anyway, even though I'm hiding. So essentially, Duster is going to take another hit, which is going to reduce her way down, which is quite dangerous. And one other thing, guys, that I did not do, which I wanted to do, but totally forgot to, so I do have to apologize for this, because I mentioned this, but I didn't actually do it, was I definitely wanted, and I mentioned this, the 2 buff HP, I wanted to use this loot, actually, before we go into the next round. I knew this even when I had 2 health on Duster, but I forgot to actually do it. But I wanted to grant any Gearloc 2 buff HP, otherwise, during a lockpick attempt, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to use it for the lockpick attempt, but I want to grant Duster 2 buff HP right now. So essentially, if I had have used that when I should have, which was during Duster's turn, which just went by, which I planned to and then totally forgot to, then technically this damage that gets fired at me right now would actually come off of the buff HP first. So this HP is going to go back underneath of Duster, and then I'm going to lose one of the 2 buff HP that I just gained. Now, you might think I'm doing this in retrospect because of the damage I just took, but I was planning on using this regardless because of how low Duster is on health, and I know that this guy is going to be making a humongous attack against me next turn, and if I don't have some health to try to stay alive, I'm in big trouble. So anyway, that is it. That is going to do it. That is a full round. Now, the only thing I haven't done yet for this one here is one mine doesn't trigger, but it does roll a defensive die. So I'm going to do that defensive die roll now. And it landed a 1, so it is now 1 up on its defense. And now we have completed round number 2. So we're going to go ahead and flip this over to round number 3, bring these down to the end, and we're going to start it off with the blue baddie, the one we were just talking about, the attack that I'm most scared of. But just as the blue baddie is about to activate in round number 3, Nightshade comes in just ahead and will actually get to activate first, and we get to place Nightshade on the battle mat because Duster is not at full health, and Nightshade emerges to the north right above the chimp halfwit, looking to strike. So Nightshade will be going first, and from its current position, I'm quite happy where it's placed. We're going to be rolling 2 attack dice against this particular chimp, hoping to do some damage and maybe even weaken it to a point where Duster can finish it off. And Nightshade is going to attack from the shadows, going after the chimp halfwit. Hopefully it's a good strike. Oh yeah, that's huge. That actually takes it out. That's awesome. So 3 damage is enough to take the chimp halfwit down. So we're going to go to the game board here and remove it. What a fantastic sneak attack by Nightshade. So Nightshade came out of nowhere to help Duster and hits 3 against this baddie here, the chimp halfwit, removing the defensive die, and 2 damage straight through will remove all of the health underneath this one. So it is out of here, and that's lane number 2 cleared. That baddie has been removed and defeated, and the initiative die for it is going to be removed out as well. Well done, Nightshade. Well done. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to move to the next baddie activating, which is the blue baddie. Now, again, I placed the Nightshade where I wanted it on purpose, mainly because we know, first of all, that Duster is untargetable, so this baddie will not be attacking Duster, but instead will now be focusing on Gasket, which is actually perfect because Gasket has a ton of defense. So it will go ahead now. It's going to move over by 1 towards Gasket, one of its 2 movement it needs to reposition. It will target Gasket, and it's going to be rolling. No, first, actually, my apologies, it will be weakening Gasket as we go ahead and activate its Weaken 2 ability. So that's kind of unfortunate, but now it's going to be rolling an extra defensive die to make the 2 total and 3 attack dice. So let's go ahead and get those dice ready, and we're going to make a big roll here and really hope that our defenses on Gasket hold. All right, here's hoping that we can hold this guy at bay. Oh, that could have been a lot worse. Okay, so we took 3 hits total and 1 defensive die will be added to the baddie that just rolled this. So the dragon grounder now has 2 1 defense dies on top of it. So that's been resolved. 3 damage is coming towards Gasket, and Gasket will use 2 of its defense dice in order to block all of that. So we only have 1 die left with 2 defense on it in the active slot for Gasket. So we're all good there. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to activate Gasket himself. So Gasket is now going to start next on the initiative meter, and Gasket is going to lose 2 decks for this particular weaken effect, which is no fun. So with 2 decks already burnt on Gasket, we have to only use 2 decks left. That's all we really have. We have the Hydro Valve die, which we have to roll if we decide to roll any other dice. And I want to. I have 1 active defense of 2 sitting in his slot right now, which I think is enough to keep him safe. It's kind of dangerous though, because we know this blue one is going to attack him. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to risk it, and I'm going to go ahead right now and I'm going to take this particular cut die here. I'm going to roll this one, and we're going to actually try to cut this guy, because my plan is if I can actually cut this one, I put a bleeding effect on him. When it activates or starts its turn, which will be very soon, next up, it will take a true damage. And then on this 4th round, it will take another true damage and be killed off without even having to worry about the defense. So it's a way to kind of get through all the defense that it keeps on recouping all the time, and then we can focus Duster on heading over here and hitting this guy for as much as possible, and then maybe have Nightshade get over there eventually. Nightshade is not really in the best position to get over there, so we might even have to use some bones to try to reposition him. We'll have to see if there's anything we can do that way. But for right now, we're going to roll these 2 dice and see how Gasket does against the target, the Mech Darter. Here we go, looking for a big, successful roll here. Nice. Okay, so we got a Hydro here to spend, as well as this skill dice, which is going to cost a Hydro. So 2 Hydro to be spent in this action here. So we'll go ahead over to our Hydro die, which is currently the primary canister is at 4. We'll drop that down to 2. And now we're going to resolve, that will resolve the Hydro Valve die, and also resolves the Hydro cost on this cut die. And the cut die now is going to place a bleed effect on this Gearlocs chip, or I should say on this baddie's chip. So let's go ahead and put that effect die on there right now. And here we go, we got an effect die called Bleeding. This is the first time we've ever seen this. It's called a bleed effect, and this unit's going to take 1 true damage at the start of its turn, and it lasts the entire battle. So it's just slowly bleeding out. That's literally all of Gasket's turn. Of course, the cut die is not exhausted and goes back in. I could use this at a later time as well. So first off, now we're going to activate the next baddie, which just so happens to be this individual. And again, being that it's a true damage, it goes straight through its defense. No way to block it. It's lost 1 of its health, which is awesome. And we're going to go ahead now and activate anything else. So self-repair does not activate because we're already at a total of 3, as it states on the die here, or on the chip. And swap, of course, will swap at the very end. So this will actually displace Gasket currently based on what's going on here. In terms of an attack, it's going to roll 1 attack die. It will be going against Gasket. So let's go ahead and take an attack die here and roll it and see how this pans out. Okay, so 1 attack gets through. Now remember, we have 2 active defense on Gasket, so we'll knock that down to 1. We have blocked that attack, and now the swap is going to happen. So Gasket and this mech are going to swap positions. So now it's over here now. So this is actually kind of a little bit of a pain, because it's causing us to have to spend decks to get over there now, right? We're wasting time by having this mech move over that way. It's an interesting mechanic to swap thing. It definitely changes up how you're basically strategizing your turn. So now that we've resolved that green lane baddie fully, we can now move to the last individual, who is Duster. And Duster at this point in time is currently untargetable. But as this is Duster's beginning of turn, we are going to remove the effect die untargetable, as this thing only lasts through to the start of the next turn. So that is now removed. Now, just so you guys remember, we do still have 1 buff HP left on Duster, and Duster still has, she has 2 HP underneath of her. So now the question really becomes, what should we do here? Now we have some dice in our skills matrix here that could help out Nightshade to become and have a more powerful attack. That might be worthwhile when going up against this massive baddie here. We also have Blade Dip, which could help, and we also don't want to forget about the fact we have Gadget Armor, which allows us to do some really cool stuff with our backup plan bone that we've been stored, or have had stored for most of the battle here. Especially like moving, for instance. So I know that I could, when resolving my roll, so after I roll, I could spend this bone that I currently have to use my backup plan to move a position, letting me move Duster from here to here for free. The only downside to that is as soon as I put myself here, I automatically make myself a target for this gigantic beast. And at that particular time, it gets a little bit scary because I don't really want to be the target of the attack. Duster's not that great at taking damage. So the question really comes down to, do I want to play chicken with this particular enemy a little bit, or just throw some dice on it and target it so that Nightshade can get in there and do some heavier damage? So let's form ourselves a strategy as to the best option. Alright, so I got my plan of attack here. Duster has 4 decks to spend. The first dex I'm going to spend is going to be moving Duster to get within range for an attack. Next, I'm going to go ahead, we're going to be rolling this die here, which is called Promise of Prey. We saw this in the last battle, where I get to roll this die, lock it in, and then basically instantly use it to pin on one of these baddies. And then when Nightshade activates, which just happens to be the next round at the very beginning, Nightshade will be able to jump to that baddie and then make an attack against it with a ×2 modifier. Now, as long as I land the ×2 modifier, that's the key. There's bones on the other side, so there's potential for a miss, of course. I'm also going to roll 1 defense die, because Duster doesn't have any defense, and it would be really good to get some on her in case she takes a hit, which with this baddie right beside her is likely to happen. And then 1 attack. So basically just to try to dwindle the shields down just a little bit. So we're going to go now to the dice tray, and we're going to roll. Now also, I don't want you guys to forget about the fact I have 1 bone sitting in reserve here for Duster. And now what I'm going to do is, once I roll these 3 dice, my plan of action will be to either, 1, depending on how much damage I do, either spend a bone to deal 1 damage to this unit here that I'm hitting, or it says any unit, but I'm going to do it against the one I'm actually trying to hit the most, which is this one here, this towering baddie here, the dragon. The dragon grounder, or I'm going to heal myself for 1 HP. So I really have to decide between the two, but we'll figure that out after I roll. So here we go. Head to the dice tray. Cross your fingers that things pan out for me. And now Duster is ready to make her roll, hoping for a super good roll here. Hey, that's not bad. We'll take it. It's 1 hit, 1 defense, and we got the Promise of Prey. So we actually didn't get any bones, which I guess is a good thing. I think we actually had a couple bone abilities that might have been pretty strong if we had gotten past 1, but that's okay. We'll go with these. So we're going to go ahead and resolve all 3 of them right now. So we rolled the Promise of Prey. We lock it in, but we can instantly use it because we have Nightshade currently on the battle mat. The reason I put it in the lock position is because you can still roll this die even if Nightshade's not out on the battle mat. But in this case, Nightshade is, so I can just instantly choose a target to put this on if I so choose. And I do want to put one on. I'll put it right on this towering beast that we're trying to take down, that we can get some big hits against. Now, next up, we've got ourselves 1 attack, which makes it through and knocks off 1 of the defense. So that's good news there. And then next up, we have 1 defense going on Duster. Would have been nice to get 2, but it didn't pan out that way. We also have a bone in the backup plan, and right now during Resolve Your Roll, I'm going to go ahead and use Gadget Armor here. This card right here, and I'm going to use it for backup plan extension number 1, and it's going to be to heal self for 1 HP. So that's going to allow me to go like this and take Duster and add 1 HP underneath, which is great. It keeps me alive hopefully a little bit longer, and I'm actually now equal level to Gasket. Not that it matters too much, because in terms of adjacency, we've already got baddies kind of lined up on us. So that is going to be the end, and that actually wraps up round number 3, and now we're going to move over to round number 4. And here we go. So round at number 4, we'll move all these to the end, flip it over to 4. Nightshade begins at the very beginning. So Nightshade, now that Promise of Prey has been targeted on the large baddie here, is able to, or may, move adjacent to that target. And I definitely want to do that. So at this point, we're going to move Nightshade all the way over here, just like this. and Nightshade will be rolling 2 attack dice, and these attack dice will be doubled based on the Promise of Prey die here. We're hoping for really a big hit here because that is going to get doubled, whatever we end up getting. So here's hoping, cross your fingers, that Nightshade can do some serious damage. Okay, well, not bad. So 2 hits times 2 is 4. So it's actually a decent, substantial hit. So we've exhausted this die for sure, and we cannot roll that again. This die will block one of the hits we're going to take of the 4, because it's 2 times 2 is 4 minus the 1. So we have 3 left over, which is going to go straight to the health of this baddie. So 1, 2, 3 chips removed. So that's actually not bad. Took a good chunk of health off of it. Looks like Nightshade will likely be the target of the attention from this baddie though. And that's going to actually resolve Nightshade's turn. Now we're going to move to the blue baddie, which is the baddie we just hit, the Dragon Grounder. So in this moment, we're going to determine targets. And as of right now, Weaken 2 can only affect a Gearloc. So that Weaken ability is going to affect, sadly, Duster. It's going to be hit by that. So let me get up the right and correct side to this die first off. That is not the one. This is the one we need. So Weaken 2 placed on Duster. And it's going to actually attack Nightshade because it goes after the weakest when there's 2 options adjacent to it. So in this particular case, Nightshade is going to be taking the brunt. The worst thing about this is that it's going to be able to roll its defensive dice again, which are 2 of them, and it's going to roll 3 attack dice. So this is probably going to knock Nightshade out, but Nightshade did come in and do what needed to be done to remove the majority of health here. So let's hope to see that this roll is not too bad, but I don't have a really good feeling about this. Oh, actually, yep, well, we got lots. Oh, this is perfect. He rolled 2 bones for his defense, so he actually will have no defense, but he did actually knock out Nightshade. So Nightshade is going to get removed, and again, as I mentioned before, always goes back to Duster's prep area with 1 HP, because you're always able to have Nightshade even if you don't heal fully for the next encounter. So 1 HP always goes on Nightshade even when it's knocked out of the match. So we'll take the initiative die out of there as well. So we've resolved all of these dice, and wow, that was interesting. But the cool thing is, I guess, is that Nightshade came in, did what we needed to do, and then on top of it, we got really lucky that he rolled bones on defense, because now we can go straight after the health here without having to deal with shields. So now, next up, we have Gasket in line to do something, and we know that Gasket doesn't really need to focus on this individual anymore, because Bleed is going to take it out. So what I could do with Gasket, which would make a lot of sense, would be to use his Hydro die, of course, because I have to, but using Blast allows me to hit somebody that's not adjacent to me. So this is a perfect time to use Blast. So I'll be using that die. And at the same time, I could potentially get some more shields up, things like that. There's not too much else I can do because I have 2 more decks to spend, but moving right now doesn't really put me in any position. Until this one's gone, I might as well just stay put and just add some defense. So it would make more sense for me to just roll a couple more defense here, so that if we do get into one of those situations where we're trying to see how long we can survive, that Gasket has enough defense to hold on. And right now I have 1 active defense on Gasket, so I'd like to kind of beef that up. So let's go ahead to the tray, roll these dice, and we're going to go ahead here and see what we can do in terms of doing a hit here with Blast against the Dragon Grounder. All right, here we go. 4 dice, ready to roll. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so we got ourselves, oh, we got one of those green bones again. We're going to have to activate it right away. We got 1 defense die here for 1 and 2. That's not bad. We're actually going to go ahead, I'll slot these 2 in, and what I'm going to do is use this green die to resolve the backup plan right away, and I will change one of these 2s, or sorry, one of these 1s to a 2, and that will resolve that die. So we'll just go like that. So now, just so you guys are aware in terms of Gasket's backup plan, we have 2 2s and 1 1 for defense, so quite a bit. And then this Blast here, again, doesn't get exhausted, but it can and immediately hits another target, or another baddie that is not adjacent to me. So again, I definitely want to hit the Dragon Grounder. So this Dragon Grounder is going to lose 1 HP, dropping it down to 3 health. So even closer to take it down. So maybe Duster, even though has not full-on decks, might be able to pull this off. We'll see how it goes. So let's head back to the battle mat. We're going to be activating the green baddie, who is going to bleed out. And this is just awesome. So right off the top here, the green baddie activates. So I'm moving that individual across the initiative meter, which is right here. It's a true damage at the start of its turn. So regardless of its defense, this baddie is gone. So that's what that cut is so useful. We're able to just get rid of it. So one baddie down there, and we only have one more to go. So we can remove that green initiative die from the track as well. And that is gonna resolve that fairly quickly. And now we can move straight to Duster, because Duster is the last initiative die in the initiative meter. So I'm gonna move that to the end. That'll conclude round number 4. So Duster, what are you gonna do? Well, first off, you're going to lose 2 decks when you try to do anything this turn. And Duster, in terms of options here, likely just wants to roll 2 attack dice. So I'm just going to roll 2 attack dice to see if we can land the exact amount of damage we need to take this thing down. If we do, we win. It's over. If we don't, this thing draws out for another round, and actually the dragon goes next. So it could get ugly. So here we go. I'm going to roll this on the battle map because I think this will be more fun. So here we go. Let's see how this pans out. Oh, just shy of killing it. So it's literally going to be alive by a single chip. So it is going to live to see another day. All right, so we're going to go to round number 5. I don't know about you guys, but I feel really good about this. We're getting right down to the wire, but we're going to take this thing down, I think. So here we go. We're going to activate the blue baddie now. Who's going to go? The Weaken is going to go on top of Duster, and he is going to be rolling 3 attack dice and 2 defense. So that's kind of vicious. So here we go. This could be bad because this defense dice could really slow us down. Let's hope that he rolls lots of bones here. Oh, that's not bad. So only 1 defense is going to go on, but 3 damage is going to happen. So the good news here, guys, I have 1 buff HP that I can remove from Duster, and then 2, or sorry, let me do this in the correct order here. First off, I have a defensive die. That will block 1 of the attack. Then Duster takes 2 hits. 1 of the buff HP will negate 1 of those hits, and then 1 chip will come out from underneath of Duster. So I still have 2 health on Duster. So she's doing all right. She's holding the fort, and there's not that much defense now on this individual. So I think we got this one in the bag. So we're gonna go ahead and activate Gasket now. We're literally just going to have Gasket do 1 move like this for 1 dex, and now we're just going to go crazy with 3 attack dice, and really we just need to get 2 hits. We get 2 hits, and Gasket again is the hero of the day. So here we go to end it. Oh yeah, easy. Boom, that guy is gone. That is another successful battle in the books for our heroes. We are victorious. So with a successful victory here, we're going to go ahead and reset everything. So Duster will come back to the mat with the exact amount of HP that she had leaving the mat, which is 2. So we may need to heal up with her. We know that Nightshade didn't fare so well in that battle, so both of them are going to need to do some healing. Coming over to Gasket here, we'll put the Hydro Valve die back in the skill dice area here. We're going to put the primary canisters back into their respective spots. We'll tick them back up to 5 for a future battle. We're going to remove all the active defense dice that he didn't even need because he's just a monster. And then he's going to come back to his prep area with the health he had, which is full. He never used anything. And he's still got that loot card to use for Power Converter later on for health if he ever needs it. But that's really, really good. Quite happy about how that all panned out. And now we can move back to the encounter card to talk about the spoils. And we're back at the encounter card. I'm really excited to dive into the rewards for this, guys. We gained a progress point, which is our 7th. We've done 7 progress in 6 days. That's phenomenal, which means we are able, if we want to go after Nobulous in the next encounter, or we could do something truly interesting by going to this particular special encounter called the Council Labs Research and Development. So that's going to be one of those choices I'll fire back to you guys at the very end here when we move into the next day. But for now, let's resolve our loot and rewards. So first off, we talked about the progress point. We gained it. We had no optional reward up here because we chose the top one. We wanted to keep things safe. And we gained 2 training points each, which is fantastic. So we can go after some things that have been holding us back, like maybe some more dex, for instance, or some health. Although health hasn't been so much of a concern as dex has been probably. And then we get some loot. So each of us will gain a loot card. So maybe we'll go ahead and do the loot first, and then we'll deal with the training points. So we'll start with Duster. Duster is going to gain the first loot card, which is Tar, Sap, and Twine. It's a single-use card, and this particular card states that during a water battle on your turn, remove up to 3 wreckage chips from positions that are either adjacent to or at your existing position. During a land battle on your turn, place an obstacle chip in an open adjacent position. That could be really good strategy-wise, especially when we go up against Nobulous, and this could be really useful. I don't know if Nobulous's battle, because I've never faced Nobulous before off camera. I don't know if Nobulous is a land battle or a water battle, but this seems like it could be something useful. So Duster is quite happy to have that. That brings Duster's total loot to a total of 3. 2 trove and 1 regular loot. Now a loot card for Gasket. We got Jungle Spear. It's a single-use card, and this one says anytime on your turn, roll 2 attack dice and deal combined damage to any non-adjacent unit. Does not cost dex. Now this is one I definitely want to give to Duster so I can use that for ranged attacks. That would be phenomenal. So I'm going to go ahead and probably have that traded off later on. But for now, as we know, Gasket can't use the cards at face value, but I'll put it in Gasket's bucket for now. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about training points. What do we want to increase? Let's first start with Duster. So for Duster, the 2 training points to be spent, 1 will be for Dex. I'm going to bump Duster's Dex up to 5. I really want to be able to move Duster around more freely and roll dice. So this is going to give me that freedom, and it's a success the second I want to train it, just like health is. The second one I want to get is Feign Death, which actually follows past Flint and Tinder and is die or skill die number 3. I want to talk to you guys about what this one does, because it is really cool, and this will help Duster quite a bit in surviving. So Feign Death has 2 sides to the die. One is a skull, basically, and one is a heart. So the heart on one side is going to heal you for 2, and on the opposite side, we have what's called Feign Death. It says the next time you would lose your last HP, instead set HP to 2 and place an untargetable effect die on yourself. So that's really good. So really you want to see this side the most, but even if you don't get that side, you're still getting a heal. So it's one of those ones that's really great for bad situations where you're running out of life and you need something to keep you alive. And I've found that Duster's gotten into those positions a couple times, so having this die will come in really handy and allow me to be a little bit more free with my dice rolling. Now the other thing I've really been hoping to roll, and I wasn't able to in the last battle, was this one here, because if I ever roll it and land this side, I can train up for free one of Nightshade's Killer Instinct or Alpha Wolf, and so I gotta really try to roll that again. I tried during this battle, but things just got too tight, but essentially that's one I really want to try, because it basically gives me a free unlock essentially. So I don't want to go ahead and spend my training points on those when I could potentially just get it for free. So that is what I'm doing with Duster. Let's head over to Gasket and see what we can do with him. I think for Gasket, a logical next step would be Dexterity. So we're going to add an extra Dexterity to Gasket. So we're getting to that point now where when I roll, I'm rolling solely for certain things. Like I'm typically trying to get a whole bunch of defense or a whole bunch of attack. And just having that extra Dex will help with movement. It can help with the fact that my Hydro die is constantly costing me a Dex just to roll. So it really basically negates it. So I still have to roll it, but I now have 4 access for anything else, which is huge. So that is definitely an improvement for the first training point. Now I really want to focus on something maybe in the skills matrix. I'm actually having second thoughts now. I was thinking I was going to go after a skill die for Gasket, but I actually have quite a few skill dice to choose from. A few of these now that I unlocked in the last time. I'm actually thinking I might lean more towards just another attack die. So I'm going to go ahead and make a roll to see if I'm successful at training my attack. So again, I'm rolling 3 dice because that's the total of what I currently have. And I have to be successful with no bones rolled on the first roll in order for this to work. So here we go. Let's see how this pans out. Oh yeah, so we got that no problem. So we're gonna go ahead and tick this up to 3. This is gonna give him more options. Now I was looking at a couple other ones in here that I was interested in, like maybe another canister of Hydro, but we've never run out of the Hydro we have. Ram looked interesting, but again, at the end of the day, Gasket's become kind of a monster in terms of keeping the defense on him. He's never really run out of defense, never really being hit for his 3 health under his chip, and I thought it might be time to get to a point where Gasket can sit put, not only keep the defense on him, but start doling out some serious punishment now that we have the Dex to do so. I can be rolling a Hydro die plus 4 attack, which really can add up pretty fast and maybe take down some of those nastier baddies. So hopefully that helps me in the long run. Of course, course, there's some skills here that would be nice to have. Directives are cool, but I'm staying away from them right now because they add a little bit of randomization into basically Gasket's computer and kind of treats him a little differently and unexpectedly. And I kind of want to control him a certain way. And I feel if I go with those, I might throw in a couple. I might throw a wrench into things if I happen to use the die during like a boss battle. I really want to have full control of Gasket and position him exactly where I think he needs to be and not allow for that random variability. But I really do think that if you build out that loadout, that can actually be very beneficial if you have that. But I just haven't gone for it in this particular build. I focused on the other ones. So that's going to do it for training points. We've done the loot. We are now finished. And now we're going to go ahead into the next phase. So we're moving into the recovery phase. This is really easy for me. I obviously want Duster to have full health, so I'm going to go ahead and rest and recover, which is going to throw 2 more health underneath of Duster. I'm going to use the Flint and Tinder die in order to heal up Nightshade, and so we'll roll that up. We got a 2, which is more than enough to get what I need to get Nightshade back up to full health. So we'll go like this. Perfect. And we're all good there. I'm not doing anything else in that regard. And then we also want to trade here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Jungle Spear from Gasket and add this to Duster's collection. We talked about this one. And this is going to put Duster at a total of 4 loot cards in total, 2 trove and 2 regular loot. And that's going to be it, I think, there's no lockpicking attempts needed. So we'll move over to Gasket and see what we're doing for recovery. Now for Gasket, there's no reason to trade any loot. I like to keep 1 on him that I can discard if I need to, so I'm happy there. No lockpicking needed, but what I'm going to do here is I don't need to rest because I have 3 health and I didn't lose a single piece of it during the last battle. So let's go ahead maybe and search the area. So we're going to go ahead and roll a d6 and see if we can find out what a potential bad is coming down the line. So we got a 5, that's really good. So we can reveal all the way up to a 20 point. Now we already know the only one we have left revealed that we scouted earlier was this Furious Gorilla. So eventually we're going to see this is a 20 point baddie. It's likely to come in the future, so I'm going to reveal a 5 because I think that's something that makes a lot of sense. And the 5 point baddie that Gasket has spotted is another Primate Trapsmith. So we've seen these before, so no need to explain those, but we'll keep that face up over there. And now we're done with the recovery phase and we can move into a brand new day. And now we move into day number 7. We've got a huge question that I need to ask you guys as we move into the 7th day. All right, so it comes down to 2 different choices for you guys, both of these right here. Really, it's going to be a special encounter, which we get to successfully put on the top of the encounter deck that says Council Labs Research and Development. I'm going to let you guys read that. And if you're interested in going this route for the 7th day, just be aware of the fact that the longer we do encounters, the higher the battle queue or baddie point total will go up, because it's always going to be a day times the number of Gearlocs. So currently we're at 7. So that battle queue will be 7 times 2, which is 14. If we spend a lot of days not going after Nobulous, the final battle will be more involved. The baddies will be stronger. However, if we actually go ahead and do the one on the left, we could potentially end up getting more training points. We could potentially end up getting more rewards, which help us to defeat Nobulous. So it's kind of a trade-off. Which one do we do? Do we try on the 7th day to maybe take Nobulous down for a first attempt and see how tough it is? And if it's impossible, then go to do the encounter or something and see if we can beef ourselves up? Or do we go through an encounter first and then go to Nobulous? Kind of tough to make that choice, but I'm going to leave that squarely up to you guys. So let me know right now. There'll be a voting icon that shows up. It's the top right-hand corner of the video. There's an eye, and you're able to click on that and vote for which of these 2 you prefer. You can also, if you don't see that eye in the video, you can just comment down below, let me know, or on social media, and I'll gather up all the feedback between all 3, and we'll come to a conclusion in the next video as to which encounter we do for day number 7. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.